Thank you for participating in this conference. We want to tell you that we finished already our meeting of the G20 this weekend under the presidency in Argentina. We considered that it's been a real success with the great attendance of 40 ministers and governors of central banks that came here, came to Buenos Aires after coming also in the March meeting. This meeting of the G20 shows that this forum continues to be the international coordination forum that is the most relevant of the world and where we have been able to achieve unanimous consensus regarding different topics on the economic agenda. As you know, the current environment presents several challenges, and we believe that it is fundamental to maintain the G20 as an area, a key area for dialogue among the member countries of this group. The dialogue has to be valued. It is the way of building consensus in this group. After so many meetings, we create a very close relationship among all of us, and that allows us truly to reach consensus that otherwise would be very difficult to build. There is a consensus that shows that growth continues to be robust, and we hope that the global economy shall grow 3.9% this year and shall repeat a similar pace next year. We analyzed the risks in the short and medium term that are given by the financial vulnerabilities, the geopolitical tensions, and the commercial tensions. Regarding trade or commerce, which is the topic that raises more interest, more expected one, we had a very constructive dialogue in the section regarding the global economy, where we have reasserted that trade and investments are engine for growth, productivity, innovation, creation of work, and development, and we committed ourselves to redoubling our efforts to strengthen dialogue as to these topics. And we believe that the dialogue that we've been able to achieve here in Buenos Aires was a great step for the building of that global consensus. Within the priorities of the Argentine presidency, we made very important steps from the previous meeting, and we achieved tangible results that have to do with the real economy and the citizens of our countries. As you know, during our presidency, one of the priorities is to work on the future of work. And we want to truly be positive of taking advantage of the technological advantage in order to foster growth and that it shall be more inclusive. We have an optimistic vision regarding the technological change, but we also know that going through this stage generates certain challenges with which we have to cope with, actually, in order to go through this stage in the best possible way and the most favorable one for our citizens. And in terms of the future of work presented by Argentina, there are four main goals: to take advantage technology, to support the people during the transition in order to confront the distribution challenges, to secure sustainable tax system, and to have the best data for the decision-making process. After this meeting, and as a result of the work that we've been doing with all the members of the G20, we will reveal a public document that covers more than 80 policies so that every country shall be able to adapt them to their own circumstances. And they go from taxation, innovation, care for work, protection programs in the transition between one job and the other one. It is a very concrete menu of options that we believe it's going to be of great advantage in this stage that we are going through. Of course, that we keep on discussing the topics of the agenda of the G20, for example, international taxation, where we've been able to make significant progress in the fight against tax evasion through the improvement of transparency international standards, and we keep on analyzing how to confront the impacts of the digitalization of the economy, because, as you know, that has a direct impact on taxation with companies that provide services from certain countries and generate value in other countries, and that can end up reducing the taxable basis of the countries where those services are provided. Therefore, there is a very constructive dialogue, and we are moving forward in the design of measures in the framework of the G20 and with the incorporation of the OECD in order to confront this problem. And so I'm going to finish here. I'm going to give the floor to Governor Caputo, the President of the Central Bank, so that he continues with other topics within the agenda of the G20. Thank you, Nicolas. The second priority of the presidency of the G20 in Argentina is investment in infrastructure, how to attract further financing, more capital for investments in infrastructure. This is a problem that affects all the countries, the emerging markets, developed countries. Ultimately, what has happened is that there is more and more demand for investment in infrastructure, and somehow most of the countries confront a situation that is very similar, which is having budgets that are limited. To that, we have to also add the fact that, for example, multilateral bodies that typically are the natural financiers of these investments also are coping with their own restrictions regarding the requirement of capital. So somehow we are making a big effort in trying to see how to attract investment from the private sector, the financing from the private sector towards these projects that have to do with infrastructure. And there are very good results in terms of these. The funds, the institutional funds today in the world handle approximately $80 billion, 80 billion dollars, 80 trillion. 80 billion, sorry, 80 billion, and only between 1 and 1.5% is allocated from those funds for financing of infrastructure. And when we ask the managers of these funds whether they would be willing to invest more, the answer is clearly yes. There is a great willingness on the private sector to finance more and more infrastructure projects. But in order to achieve this, well, the Argentine presidency, we have built a kind of roadmap in order to facilitate that investment from the private sector. The final goal is to transform infrastructure as an asset class, and this has two sides. For that, we have to be able to have all the preparatory phase so that it becomes an easily analyzed and standardized project. And on the other hand, we have the financial aspect, the financial contract, where we have to make these contracts be somehow more standardized so that they can become commerciable. And once they are commerciable, we can achieve this goal that they become an asset class. And once that category is reached, well, for all these institutional funds, it is easier for them to invest money, and ultimately it would be the solution that we are looking for. And also we discussed a lot about financial regulation and financial inclusion. And here we really focused on the new technologies, with all the benefits entailed, and also, of course, having to monitor the eventual risks. We talked about the crypto assets, the cryptocurrencies and the crypto assets. The consensus showed that they don't represent a global risk on the financial system, but of course, as I said before, we really took into account the fact that, given the fact that these are technologies that are only beginning, that are at their infancy, we have to really control them and also survey everything that has to do with illegal activities. Now, regarding the financial inclusion, well, there was full consensus reached. And of course, that financial inclusion contributes to growth and the improvement of the standard of living of all the citizens, that there is full support to this topic. And we focus especially, as the minister said, on the digitalization and the benefits entailed by it, especially in less developed countries where the informal economies represent an important percentage of the economy. So digitalization would be a first step towards formality, and also always under the assumption of monitoring everything that has to do with customer protection, and as I said before, also checking any kind of illegal activity. But that is essentially the summary. Okay, good afternoon. Doug Commons from Reuters. As compared with March, this communique seems to reflect more concern as compared to the previous communique regarding international trade. In March, you highlighted that we need more dialogue. This time, you said that we need to intensify dialogue. Why this change in language? And what was the impression of the discussion regarding international commerce? I believe that, well, the communique is similar. Here we talk about strengthening dialogue, but always maintaining a positive vision regarding commerce in terms of source of creation of growth and increase of productivity, innovation, and creation of employment, and also a source of development. Actually, what we can highlight is that the G20 is a forum where what prevails is constructive dialogue. And then the environment, in order to solve the differences from the practical point of view and trade point of view, has to do with the bilateral negotiation and also dialogue through the World Trade Organizations, which are the spheres where there are formal discussions of this topic. In more conceptual terms, in the G20, we still support commerce as a positive source of creation of prosperity. Good afternoon, Roman Lekman from Radio Nacional. A question for Minister Duhovne and a question for the Governor of the Central Bank, Luis Caputo. For Minister Duhovne, in item 2 of the communique, there is reference specifically to the Declaration of Hamburg, and says, we recognize the need to intensify dialogue and actions in order to mitigate risk and strengthen confidence. In that Hamburg Declaration, there is a specific criticism to protectionism, and we all know that the U.S. has started defense to protectionism, putting quotas on steel and aluminum that would be exported to the U.S. Within that context, how can we defend the Declaration of Hamburg and not question the position of the U.S. that is closer to protectionism and not so much to free trade? That is for Minister Caputo. And the president for the governor of the central bank has to do with, it says there's still challenges for emerging countries, for example, volatility of markets and the reversion of capital flows. The question in this item is that, is there any strategies among the central bank regarding emerging countries in order to prevent, as in the case of Argentina, the suffering of external shock that ended up in the resignation of two ministers, governor of the central bank, and a very deep devaluation? Thank you.
I'm going to take the first question. I think that in this group of countries that are members of the G20, there is a very strong and clear vision that we have to keep this group alive and functioning in harmony. Because in bad times, it is when we see how important, how key this group is. Let's think of the key role the G20 played in the 2018 crisis, 28 and 29 crisis, in order to avert the problems of the crisis. It avoided, it prevented losses that could have occurred. Millions of lives and jobs. If we stem from this basis, we have to acknowledge that in this group, since it has that purpose as well, we have to emphasize consensus, that constructive dialogue is an essential part of that task. So it's not a question of denying differences that can exist in certain fields. There's always dialogue in the different sessions, a very rough and sincere dialogue. But when it comes to building an agreement and drafting a communique, we will try to emphasize consensus, because we acknowledge the importance of keeping this group alive and in harmony. I'm not sure if I understood the question very well, Roman, but I'm going to try to give you an answer. I hope I understood correctly. The last line of the first part of the communique, even if different emerging economies are better prepared for external conditions, they still face volatility of markets and the reversal of capital flows. In this point, the question is there a way of establishing, or you discuss as common strategy, at least the central bank governance from emerging countries, so that in Argentina or other emerging countries repeat what happened from May the 2nd up until today? Well, the first that I would highlight is, as the minister said before, the consensus is of a situation, external situation, that is more favorable. The growth consensus is of 3.9%, the same for the next year. And when we talk about rates with central bank governors, the interest rate contest is essentially the one the market is aware of. Very predictable. The situation in the United States today, even if it's very good, from the point of view of growth and employment, they are at a lowest unemployment rate, about 4%. There is few pressure on the employment salaries, so that makes them feel comfortable with the fact that they are not going to have any surprises in terms of inflation, and that they will continue having a gradual policy and very predictable one, gradual monetary policy as they have been having. In Europe, the situation is pretty similar. There's no pressure on salaries. Inflation is a bit below 2%, but regardless of all that, there is a lot of awareness of the fact that if something of this does not flow the way we expect, they will have a direct impact on emerging countries. And of course, as Minister Duhovne said, all this context favors dialogue, interpersonal relations that help us a lot to later enforce cooperation. We believe that is precisely the volatility that we have suffered in the latest months. There has been a lot of international support, and the package we were able to negotiate so well with the IMF in size and in structure of the package per se had to do with the excellent predisposition of the IMF as well as the support from all the member countries. I would like to ask you, to both of you,
about the behavior of FRB. As Mr. Caputo mentioned, the hiking interest rate in the FRB was expected. But also, the hiking interest rate in the FRB is one of the biggest reasons of the market turbulence in emerging market. And Argentina is victims. Some of emerging countries have frustration about this situation. So could you give me your candidate opinion about the FRB's monetary policy? Thank you.
Bueno, un poco entonces.
Similar to what I have just mentioned, to what I have just answered to Roman, the rate situation, interest rate situation, is the one the market expects. There has been certain turmoil in the case of Argentina in particular from April on, a little bit due to that volatility in international markets with the 10-year interest rate above 3% in the United States. And as we mentioned before, with some mistakes on our side, all that brought about a combination of a situation of higher volatility. This new administration of the central bank in terms of monetary policies have taken what we believed had been the most necessary measures in order to contain that excessive volatility. What we are concerned is in the controlling of inflation. We have with an eye on the exchange market, foreign exchange market, because that excessive volatility in that market has its repercussion on prices as well. So we believe that we have taken the necessary measures. There is no financing of the central market to the national treasury. We have raised the match by 8%, that is to say about $150 million. We increased the Lebac market to 700 basic points, and all that has contributed to the tranquility of the markets that we are seeing today. Good afternoon. Natasha Niebieski from Clarín. To Governor Caputo and Minister Duhovne, I would like to know what has been the specific position of the Secretary of the Treasury, Min Jin, about commerce. What is the position from Donald Trump? What was the answer? What was the debate with the United States in detail, if you could? And on the other hand, what was the position of the United States on financial turmoil? And what was the answer you've given to the United States from emerging countries and their vulnerabilities? The conversations we had at the sessions, at the G20 sessions, are confidential, and whatever is public is drafted in the communiqué, and that's what I'm able to answer. President, Minister, Victoria from GWA agency. First, I wanted to talk about the declaration of the European Union hosts highlighted the support to multilateralism and the commitment of promoting a reform to the World Trade Organization. From the G20, Argentina also highlights this position of China. And what is your situation in the eventual case of the reform to the WTO? As I said before, as part of the presidency, Argentina has to take up a role of mediators and to seek consensus. As organizers of dialogues, we have our priorities, of course. Each country has their own visions that they bring to the summit. So all those opinions are welcome, and our role here is to foster that discussion. But it is not important in that context the position of Argentina per se. We would have to analyze the position of Argentina. It would be for the authorities of the Foreign Office to analyze that position, who carry out the commercial relations with the world. But the role of the G20 is precisely to welcome this type of positions, to discuss them, and to seek the necessary consensus. Last question. Pablo Vinocourt from A24.com. The communiqué states that fiscal policy has to be flexible and favor growth. How you conjugate that with the fiscal tightening policies of Argentina after the foreign exchange crisis, and what are the suggestions for the real economy? And Minister Duhovne, you spoke of the relation between all their partners. How did you experience the change of presidency of the central bank in terms of internal relations with the other countries? Of course, we think that fiscal policy we are carrying out is the necessary one in order to promote growth in Argentina. Because currently, given the conditions, the international conditions, and access to financing, this is the fiscal policy Argentina needs in order to ensure growth, sound growth. And in fact, if we didn't have the support from the financial community that has expressed itself through the aid support package that we have achieved, not only with the IMF, but all the multilateral organisms, Argentina would have had to sought a more tightening fiscal policy than the one they chose. Because when we have difficulties with finances, countries have to convert the surplus in order to face their commitment. So we think this is the adequate fiscal policy to ensure a sound growth. And now I give the floor to Luis for the second part of the question.
El apoyo es siempre hacia Argentina es realmente
the support Argentina receives is great. Not only the support given by ministers, but by central bank governors. And I have had the opportunity of having bilateral meetings with the president of the General Reserves of the United States, of the Central Bank of Europe, of the United Kingdom Central Governor, the Brazilian Central Bank Governor. We have had excellent dialogue with all. We also have had a very good conversation in terms of the present situation in the world. It's very interesting to see their point of view of the world, what their perspectives, their outlook is, and all different sorts of views that really nourish our point of view. And as I said before, we have had a total support from them all. Thank you all.